So, thank you all for joining us for the grad school prep series, Finding the Right Program for You. Joining us today is Dr. Dave Beasley from Admissions and Recruitment, and he's going to discuss with us an important step towards beginning a graduate school. So, it's finding the right program for you. So, I will hand it over to Dave to get us started.
Thanks so much, Marlena. Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Dave Beasley. I'm the Recruitment and Admissions Specialist here with the UNLV Graduate College. I'm so glad to be with you all today. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared, and we'll sort of jump right in here so that we can talk a little bit about this process. And what I want to talk today is I want to try to do a couple of different things. So in talking about finding the right program, I also want to talk about sort of things that you can do to position yourself for success, kind of no matter what the right program for you is. So let's sort of dive right in here. And I would encourage you to sort of think about some really basic questions here as we begin this and as you begin to think about graduate school, right? Now, obviously, I want all of you to come to UNLV. But more than that, I want you all to go to the right place for you and a place that's really going to support your needs. So I think it's important to start with some really basic questions and then sort of go from there. So what is your end goal? I think is a really essential question, right? Like, do you want to be a researcher? Do you want to be a college professor? Do you want to work in the private sector? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a lawyer, right? What are your end goals? Because that's going to determine a lot of things, right? So for example, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, like you have to go to medical school, you have to go to law school, right? Whereas if you want to be a researcher, if you want to be a teacher, if you want to be a professor, there's a lot of different options for you. If you want to work in the private sector, there's even more options, right? Another question I think is important to ask is, do you want a master's or a PhD, right? If you're looking at a graduate program, PhDs require significantly more time and research than master's degrees, but they also allow you to do a lot more specialization. If you're thinking, you know, I think I just want to do a master's now, do you think a PhD might be in your plans down the road? If so, you want to find a master's program that has a thesis option because you want to write a thesis. Just if you want to have that option down the line, a lot of times doctoral programs, if you have a master's degree, they like to see a thesis. You know, is it important to you to be able to get lots of scholarships and things like that? It sure was to me when I was applying to graduate school. So you want to make sure that you apply to a place that has assistantships or other means of financial support for you, right? So these are some really basic questions that I would encourage you all to really reflect on and think, hey, what is my end goal here, right? What degree or degrees do I want, do I need for the career that I'm looking at for what my ultimate goals are, and then sort of go from there. And from there, I think we can start to think about how do you choose what and or where you want to study, right? So, because that's a big question too, right? Like I said earlier, you know, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, your path is pretty much laid out for you. If you're not quite sure, then your path is you know, has maybe a few more options. Or if you want to sort of end up, you know, somewhere in the business world, somewhere in the private sector, you got a few more options. So again, in thinking about programs, start with the outcome. You know, what career do you want, and then figure out what degrees you need from there. I would also encourage you all to think beyond your bachelor's degree. So a lot of people continue on through graduate and professional school in areas that they got their undergraduate degree in, or they picked their undergraduate major because they thought that it would help prepare them for that. For example, a lot of folks who want to go to law school major in English or history or political science because there are some skill sets that are pretty reliably transferable from those programs, right? All my degrees are in English, so I stayed in English all the way through. Other people do radically different things as graduate students than they did as undergraduate students. They completely switch gears. So don't feel like you're totally locked in by your bachelor's degree. I would encourage you as well to research different fields, reach out to professionals in those fields, find out what degrees they have, find out, you know, what they wish they had known. You can always schedule a meeting with us here at the Graduate College. You can reach out to us at gradrecruitment@unlv.edu or give us a call at 702-895-4543. We'll be happy to sit down and help you sort of think through options and things like that I do want to mention that we do not here at the Graduate College, we work with just about every program at UNLV except the law school, the dental school, and the medical school. But we have contacts in those programs and we can get you hooked up with the appropriate people. So one thing as well that you need to do is you want to start this process early. And I've got a timeline slide here coming up. But I think that it'll be helpful to start this process early because you're going to research and apply to programs as opposed to schools. When you're an undergrad, you're applying to schools. As a graduate student, you're going to research programs, right? Different universities have different systems. Some are highly centralized, some are highly decentralized. We're a little bit in the middle here at UNLV. You want to start narrowing down your programs early. And one thing is, once you determine exactly what you want to study, there are all kinds of subfields within that specific field. So different programs are going to be strong in different areas. And I would really encourage you to think about what is it exactly that you really want to do? And you want to find a program that might be strong in those particular areas, right? So you want to start reaching out to faculty and your departments or programs that you're interested in early on. Talk to faculty that you know now, talk to graduate students, check out petersons.com. I'll also mention those of you interested in medical school, law school, things like that. Those schools often have their own separate admissions offices. So you'll want to look, if you want to do the Boyd Law School, right, they have their own admissions office. And so you would want to look up the Boyd School of Law admissions office and look and see what they have there. The next thing you need to do is start figuring out the kinds of application requirements that you're going to need. Now, there's certain things that you're going to need pretty much no matter what. Like you can count on needing letters of recommendation. You can count on needing a personal statement. You definitely need transcripts. But then other programs too might be looking for more specific things. They might be looking for a writing sample. So you'd want to take probably your best undergraduate paper in the field or in a related field, polish it up, add a little bit more research, maybe take it down to the writing center, let them give you a hand with it, and make sure it's really tip top and argument structure is really, really solid and clear. Other programs might want a full portfolio from you. So you really want to start gathering these things and making sure that you're in a good position to have everything you need when it is time for you to start doing that. And I would also say deadlines are non-negotiable with graduate schools. I wouldn't even bother trying to negotiate that with them. That's not how you want to come to them right off. Say, hey, I need more time. So let's talk a little bit about timelines. So I know that you all have at least 60 credits here to be part of the Grad Level Advantage program. So you maybe that this is your last year. It may be that you've got one more year to go. Either way, sort of here's a general timeline. So about a year beforehand, you want to start gathering information, narrowing down programs, right? Finding the programs that study what you want to study, right? Because again, like let's say you want to study history, right? And let's say specifically you want to study the history of the American Revolution, right? So there's all kinds of graduate history programs across the country, and I'm sure that all of them could tell you a little something about the American Revolution. But some of them will be stronger in those areas than others, right? Some biology programs will be stronger in microbiology or cellular biology than others, right? The same is true with physics programs, English programs, right? Some schools may be really strong in Shakespeare, other schools may be strong in 18th century literature, which is my area of expertise, or modernism, and maybe stronger in American literature than British literature. So you really want to sort of drill down on, hey, here's what I want to do, and now I need to find a program that matches that, right? You also want to start, if you're looking at like professional school, especially, if you're doing any shadowing, internships, things like that, you want to have those well underway by now. But 6 to 12 months before the application deadline, you want to start reaching out. You've got a good list now. Now you want to start reaching out to schools, programs, and faculty. You want to start studying for standardized tests if you need to take any of those, right? Start these dialogues because it's really important that schools know who you are, right? So that they can put sort of a face to a name, right? So that when your application comes across, it won't be this person that they've never talked to. It'll be, oh, yes, I know this individual. They emailed me. They're really interested in this area of study that I'm also really interested in. And so it's really important, I think, to do your homework and to start this process early so you can really find a good list of schools, and also a list of schools that are going to be schools that you feel like you have a good chance of getting into, right? So it's sort of like undergrad, right? If you remember that, right? You maybe had like one school that was maybe a little bit of a reach, and you had 2 or 3 schools that you felt really confident in, and then maybe you had kind of that safety school, right? Like you're like, okay, I really feel good about this school, about this program, right? It's not quite as cut and dried in that with grad school, because it is harder to get into graduate school than it is to get into undergrad. But it can be sort of a similar process. I'll also say on that front, though, don't panic. My safety school for my doctoral degree was the first one that I heard back from, and they were a strong no. So, and I still got into 2 other schools. So, sometimes it's tough to predict the process. 3 to 6 months before your application is due, you want to really start putting together those portfolios and writing samples. You want to start looking at those personal statements and getting that done. Determining who you're going to ask for letters of recommendation. 1 to 3 months before, you're going to take any exams that you need to take. You're going to continue the preparation of your materials. You're going to ask for letters of recommendation. You're going to pull together your resume or your CV. You're going to really do that. And then you want to apply 1 to 2 weeks before the deadline, or the actual final deadline is when you want to apply. Give yourself time in case there's a problem with the application, in case something doesn't go through, in case one of your recommenders disappears on you, right? You don't want to be scrambling around at the last minute getting everything in. You want to get it in a little bit beforehand. That way, if there's a problem, if the program reaches out to you and says, hey, we got your application, but we don't have this one piece, right? Maybe the system ate it. Maybe you forgot to upload it. Well, if you do it a couple of weeks beforehand, guess what? You're still not late, right? You can be like, oh, I'm so glad you said that. I don't know what the issue was there, but here it is. Let me go ahead and give this to you. And that way they have everything and you're still on. So when it comes to sort of narrowing your programs, okay, sort of once you're sort of in this process, you've started to look around, you say, hey, this is what I want to study, this is what I want to do. Here are the programs that I think I'm interested in. And you're going to do this like any other research, right? You're going to start with this huge number of programs. And then you're going to start sort of whittling it down, right? And at this, in that early stage, you might pick out, 10 or 15 programs that you think you're interested in, and you're going to learn more about them, right? And you may pick those all kinds of different ways. Part of this is about like, you're going to live wherever this school is for a couple of 3 years. So, look, I don't do cold weather, okay? It's just not something that I particularly enjoy. So I didn't really look at any cold weather states for graduate or professional for grad school, right? I was like, I'm not going to be snowed in, right? I'm just not going to do it. So now maybe you love cold weather and you really want to do that. Also, it may depend on what you study. I have a dear friend who works for an environmental agency in Florida. She's a coastal geologist. She studies like tidal erosion patterns, which is increasingly important, right? Climate change. So obviously, you can't really do that in Nebraska. You've got to do that someplace where they got tides and coasts. So she did her master's work at Louisiana State University, which is right on the Gulf of Mexico, and she did her doctoral work at Florida State. Right. So sometimes what you want to study will determine where you go to school and the geographic location of where you want to go to school. Right. Um, Keep in mind too that each program is going to be a little bit different in what they require. So some programs may require certain test scores, other programs may not. Some programs may require 2 writing samples, other programs may require 1. Some programs may have a very specific prompt for a personal statement, some programs won't. So there's going to be some variation. Most students ultimately, I think, apply to between 3 and 7 overall programs. Now, that number is based on a number of factors, not the least of which is financial cost here, okay? Because tests are expensive. Each application, the applications are usually around $60 a throw, right? Some are even as high as 70. They can be even more expensive if you're an international applicant. So I applied to 3 schools for my master's. I applied to 6 for my PhD. I think that's about average based on based on some reading that I've done, there certainly are people who apply to 20 programs. And if you've got the money and want to do it, go for it. It sounds like a lot of work to me. I think that, and it's just like undergrad too, that any place you apply, you want to make sure you're willing to go there if they say yes, right? So if you sort of look at it and you're like, yeah, I don't really think so, I don't think I'd go there, then don't apply, save your money. You also want to tailor each application package to the school and the program, right? So as you're sort of looking through, so for example, I'm an 18th centuryist by trade, okay? UNLV had two faculty and still does have two 18th century literature faculty here. So that was something that made UNLV stand out to me, right? When I learned that most programs only have one faculty member in that area. So that's something that made it stand out to me. It's also something that I mentioned in my application. So your research is going to help you a couple of different ways is what I'm getting at. It's going to help you in terms of finding the right program for you. It's also going to help you, though, put together a really strong application that shows that you've done your homework and that you know what you're looking at, right? You definitely want to reach out to the program coordinator or any designated faculty in the program. Again, let them know you're interested in, and then start identifying and reaching out to faculty with research interests similar to your own. Do not be afraid to send people an email. And, be polite, introduce yourself. Hi, my name is, I'm a student at UNLV. I'm really interested in your master's program, in your doctoral program. I see that your research interest is this. And I would be curious to know, I'm also interested in that. I don't know if you're, taking people in your labs right now or just tell them that. But you really want to do your homework because otherwise you can kind of embarrass yourself. So I'm the recruitment and admission specialist here at the Grad College, and I had a student email me from another school the other day. And they really wanted to study. They really wanted to study in one of our science programs, and they told me all about that. It was a great email. It was fantastic. They told me all about their research interests. They told me all about the studies they had been involved in, the things that they published as a master's student. It was really quite impressive, everything they were. Problem was, they thought I was faculty in that program. They wanted to join my lab, right? And so they didn't quite do enough research, right, to figure out sort of who I was, and that I wasn't really the person. So I, sent them a nice email back, and I said, this all sounds great, but I'm not faculty in that program, and I don't run a lab there. I'm a literary scholar by trade. So you don't want that experience. Now, obviously, I'm not going to call that program and tell on somebody, but you don't want to email the wrong faculty member at the wrong school, right? You don't want to confuse them with one of their colleagues. That doesn't come off well. So really make sure you do your homework here. Okay, so let's talk about, once you've identified your program, and let's talk about some things that you can do to make yourself attractive no matter what program you're interested in, okay? And no matter what program you ultimately choose. Because the grad school application process is a process. You cannot do it overnight. There are some things that you really need to do early on and that will make you attractive to any program that you apply to. So if you're looking for a graduate degree, research experience, really important, especially for those of you looking to go directly into doctoral work. You want to get hooked up with your faculty, with grad students, and be involved in research, get involved in labs, even if it's not necessarily a lab in a research area that you want to be in down the line. It's still valuable experience, right? Like if you want to be a biologist, just getting into any biology lab is going to be valuable experience. It's going to show them that you're familiar with how to work in a lab, that you know lab safety, that you know lab procedures. It's going to allow you to talk about that. It's also just going to show that like, hey, you know how to be part of a team, right? So that's really, really important to do at this point. If you're not sure where to start, the Office of Undergraduate Research here on campus is an amazing resource for this. They can help you get involved in research across a wide array of fields. Work experience and internships are also really important, right? Especially if you're aiming for professional school, law school, med school. If you're looking to go to law school, see if you can get a small job somewhere at a law firm, even if you're just like filing papers or, like just anything you can do to kind of get your foot in the door. And I would also say, sometimes people want to go for these like really big firms that have, like a million lawyers and these big reputations, and that's all great. And there's value in that. Don't get me wrong. And if that's the route you want to go, that can really work. But I would also encourage you to think about smaller firms. The same is true if anybody's looking at med school, you might work in a smaller office because you're going to get more time with the professionals, right? You're going to get more time with the attorneys. You're going to get more time with the doctors, whether if you're in some huge big thing, you might just be going and getting coffee all the time. And you don't want to just be doing that, right? Again, a lot of those professional programs are looking for shadowing experience. And it doesn't matter which program you're looking at, they want to know, that you know what's going on. If you're interested in medical school, dental school, physical therapy, or occupational therapy, reach out to our pre-professional advising center on campus. They can help you get hooked up with some folks too. Now, if you really want to take your application to the next level, if you really want to make it so, and I think this is true for those of you who have identified highly competitive programs that you want to get into, okay? And there's a lot of highly competitive programs across the country. Conference presentations and publications will put you at the next level. They're not required. Nobody's going to expect you to have any of this as an undergraduate student. That's why you want to try to get some of it, because it'll really make your resume or your CV stand out to an admissions committee. So if you're involved in lab research, and this is a little bit easier in the social sciences and the STEM fields because they're like a lot more group collaborative projects. In the humanities, we tend to be more individualized, but I'll have hopefully I'll have some suggestions for you all as well there too. So see if you can be involved in a conference presentation. See if you can get your name on the poster somewhere. You can put that on your CV. Even if you don't end up going to the conference, even if you don't fly across the country to present at the conference, just the fact that your name is on it, you can still put that on your CV. That'll still stand out to an admissions committee. The Office of Undergraduate Research here on campus also hosts research symposia throughout the year. I'd really encourage you all to put in for it. Publications. If you can get like a peer-reviewed publication, this will be such a big deal. If you're involved in research, again, this is a little bit easier in the social sciences and the STEM fields because the nature of the work is more collaborative. If you're in a lab and your lab is going to publish something, see if you can volunteer to write a section of it or be involved in it in any way you can so that you can get your name. Even if you're like the 6th or 7th author on something, it still counts, right? You've still been involved in the process, and it shows an admissions committee that you really are committed to this. Also, for those of you, and this is true whether you're in the sciences or the humanities, but for those of you in the humanities where this might be a little bit tougher in terms of sort of the broader peer-reviewed journals, the Office of Undergraduate Research also publishes Spectra, a peer-reviewed journal for undergraduate research. That can go on your CV as well. Keep in mind too that even if you don't have the final say-so from the journal, if you're part of a team or you've got something under review at a journal, you can include that on your CV. You just need to say in parentheses afterwards that it's currently under review. So you're not saying, hey, I published this. You're saying this is under review at this particular journal. So let me talk a little bit about sort of minimum requirements and being competitive, right? So all the programs that you look at are going to have minimum requirements, okay? But you really want to exceed those minimum requirements. So let me give you an example, right? Our clinical psychology PhD program here at UNLV is an amazing program, okay? They establish a minimum GPA of 3.0 for their for students applying to the program, but the median GPA of admitted students is 3.7, okay? So, you can see there, right? That like, hey, I have a 3.1, that's probably not going to be enough. Or, hey, I have a 3.6, that's close enough, I think, for me to be competitive, especially if I can put out something else, right? Also be aware that some programs, especially cohort-based programs, take a set number of students each year. So for example, the Doctor of Physical Therapy program here at UNLV, they received 461 applications last year for 48 spots. They had more than 48 qualified people, right? So you can see that's like virtually 10% acceptance rate, right? The creative writing MFA program here at UNLV, they take 15 writers every year. It doesn't matter how many applications they get, they take 15 writers. They take 5 fiction writers, 5 poets, and 5 creative nonfiction writers. That's it, that's the number. So be aware of that. And by the way, these are totally fair questions to ask programs that you're interested in. Do you take a set number of students every year? Does it vary, right? There's usually a range, but some programs are very fixed. We take this many students each year. I believe that the law school takes 125 each year, right? So some are very set. Others are not so set, and it's really like, hey, we have, we'll take as many qualified applicants as we can get. Most programs as well do what we call holistic admissions. So holistic admissions means they're going to look at the entire application package. So that means two things. Number one, if you've got an area of your application that you wish was a little bit stronger, join the club. We all have that. So don't really worry about that too much. Just sort of work harder on the other areas. But it's also encouragement to work really hard on everything else, right? Because having a really high GPA but a really poorly done personal statement is not a good combination. Okay. You want to make sure that everything is really on point. You also want to be aware of your trajectory, right? Are you moving up in the world, right? Are your grades improving as you go, especially if your GPA is maybe a little bit lower? Like, hey, I know I'm a little low, but if you look at my last 2 years, I really kind of gathered myself and was much stronger. So that's, that holistic admissions is a little bit of a double-edged sword.
Super
So,
quick, Dave.
yeah,
Do you happen to know the odds for the couples and family therapy program, like how many students they accept each year?
I don't know the exact number there. I know that they have a really structured process wherein they do interviews. So I know that they invite more students for interviews. I want to say they take around 30 students, but I don't know. But if the person that has that question, if you send me an email, I can try to get a little bit more information.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave.
Absolutely. So when it comes time to apply to different programs, you want to tailor your application to your different programs. So what I mean by that is you want to make sure that your application is meeting the needs of those individual programs, right? So your transcripts are your transcripts. Your test scores are your test scores. Your writing sample, for the most part, is your writing sample, okay? But your personal statement can really be tailored to your program. So a lot of programs are going to ask you to identify research interests and faculty to work with, and that's partially, that's what you should be doing in selecting programs, right? You want to make sure that they got people that do what you want to do, right? So it's not enough, though, to simply identify them. You want to demonstrate that you understand their research and that your research interests align with theirs. It's not saying like, hey, we're interested in the exact same thing. It's saying, I'm interested in this aspect of it. Like, I know you work on this. I'm interested in this other aspect. I think that our research has some interesting areas of overlap. And I think that I may be a really good addition to your lab as a result of that, right? So you definitely want to look up program faculty, see if they have a website or if their lab has a website. Learn about them. There's lots of ways to do that. A lot of faculty will put their CV with their curriculum vitae, their academic resume online. You can read their publications. You don't want to sort of, you don't want to sort of throw yourself at their feet. But you do want to say, you do want to approach them in a professional manner and say, hey, I understand that you work in these areas. I'm interested in these areas as well. And you want to discuss the specifics of the program. So what I always sort of recommend is when you're working on your personal statement to have like a section, your areas of interest are not going to change, right? What you want to research is not going to change, but maybe have a small section in your personal statement where you can tailor something about the lab, about the program, about the faculty that you want to work with, about research materials that they have there, resources there, library things, anything that you can find that just shows that you've really done your homework. So I want to say this last thing, and then I want to have some time for Q&A to hear from you all. So this last thing I think is really important in terms of selecting programs, but also in terms of getting them to select you, okay? So applying to and paying for school are really kind of one and the same when it comes to graduate and professional school. First thing you want to do, if those assistantships are important to you, make sure that the program you're interested in has them. Some programs don't. Sometimes, especially smaller schools, they don't have nearly as much money to support their graduate students. It's not that they don't want to, it's just that they have, very real budgetary limitations. And so you don't want to end up doing something, that's sort of unfunded, because then you're paying out of pocket and you're not necessarily getting the kind of experience that you'll need. you do want to make sure that you prepare the best application possible. Programs are going to offer money and other inducements to you to get you to come based on where you are on their list. If you're at the top of their list, they'll come over. Um, and this is, I would say, especially important for professional school applications. There's really no such thing as like a graduate assistantship in law school or medical school. You can, get jobs working on campus. You can do other things, but it doesn't work in exactly the same way. But those schools have money in other ways. They have scholarships, but usually they give those scholarships on admission. And then as long as you maintain a certain grade point average and a certain number of credits, then you get to keep your scholarship all throughout. So, it's cliche, but it's also true, right? You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So really sort of come through with that, put your best foot forward, take the extra few minutes on every piece of your application, do proofread that personal statement one last time, right? Um, Study for that test a little bit longer, right? Do all of these things, really put your best foot forward. Those of you that are looking to do doctoral work, if you're able to go straight to PhD, I would recommend doing that. It's easier to get funding that way. That said, not everybody's able to do that. I was not a fantastic undergraduate student. I did okay, but my grades would not really allow me to be a competitive applicant in PhD programs. So I went and did a master's first, and then I did a PhD after that. I proved myself, and that's fine. I kind of bet on myself, and it worked out. And I would encourage you all to do that as well if you need to. So that's sort of everything I have formally here. I know that's a lot of information. I'm going to make sure that that this information gets over to Marlena so she can share it with you all. But I think we do have some time left for Q&A. So I'll be happy to take any questions that you all have. And Melanie, do reach out to me. I'll put the email address here in the chat. And this is true for anybody that wants to reach out. And I can get you a little bit clearer answer on couple and family therapy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to know because that's the program I'm interested in. And I really don't know if I'm going to end up taking like a little bit of a gap time because I want to be thorough in the application process because there's these deadlines you were talking about. And I want to make sure I take the GRE on time. I want to make sure I prepare my personal statement, my CV, and all that, and get more lab experience in like a lab that I like. And then over the summer try to do some kind of like internship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot, and I think those are all good things that you can do. Sort of to prepare yourself for that program. I mean, it's certainly a competitive program. It's not competitive the way that clinical psychology PhD is, where they get like 200 applications for like 7 spots. But it certainly is a competitive program. I have a good friend who applied to it last year, and she made it to the interview stage, but she didn't get to that final bit. So she's reapplying this year, sort of taking that knowledge. And keep that in mind too, everybody, that you may have a dream school or a dream program, and it may take 1 or 2 times through the process, and that's okay. Lots of people, and I mean, even some of your faculty, and there are highly successful people in fields throughout that took them 3 or 4 cracks to get in. I have a cousin who's a radiologist. We're all first generation in my family. We've come a long way, but it took him 5 tries to get into medical school, and now he's a really successful radiologist with his own practice, and did really well in med school. Did his internship, or excuse me, his residency at the University of Virginia Medical School. It's one of the top schools in the country. I mean, so it works for people. Opal has a great question here. In going straight through to PhD, what GPA is considered competitive? Some of this is going to be program dependent. I would think you'd want to look for about a 3.5 though. I think to be in the ballpark to go straight through. If it was higher, that would be good. A lot of PhD programs are looking for a minimum of a 3.0 or a 3.25. My overall undergraduate GPA was like a 3.29, and a lot of my programs were 3.25 programs. So I just didn't feel like I had enough clearance. I thought like I'm just barely over that. I'm just barely scraping by. So I sort of, did something a little bit different. But I think if you're carrying a 3.5, I think even a 3.4 with a really solid trajectory over the last couple of years could be competitive as well.
I have a question. It's like more of a conundrum. It's a bit loaded. Pardon me. Um, I myself have been struggling with deciding what to pursue in graduate studies, which I think has been a problem my whole career in college, as I am just about to change my major again. I know that I want to go to graduate school, but I am struggling with kind of narrowing down what program I would like to go into. Some advice I received was maybe do something different for master's and then something else different for PhD, but I just don't know.
Tracy, I think you're in the same boat a lot of people are. It's a big decision. And I've always sort of found the kind of the way that, it's like, okay, come to college and decide what you want to do for the rest of your life. You've got like 6 months. Right. That always has sort of struck me as strange. I changed majors as an undergraduate. And I'll also tell you this, I'm 40 years old and I'm still not totally sure what I want to be when I grow up. I really wanted to be the shortstop for the Dodgers for a long time, but I just don't think that's going to happen anymore. So outside of that, so all that's a roundabout way of saying, like, I certainly understand. What I think I would recommend you to do, and anybody who's got that, is send us an email, set up a time to come over and sit down with us, or we can do it over WebEx or over the phone, and let's really sort of walk through this, and let's sort of figure out, let's kind of do kind of a deep dive, and do a little brainstorming together. And what we can do is, we probably won't come up with the exact program that day, but what we can come up with is maybe a list of 3 or 4 things. And I think that that might make that process a little bit more manageable. It's really hard to just be like, to sort of have somebody be like, okay, you can do whatever you want. And it's like, well, that's almost as bad as saying you can't do anything, right? Because the options are seemingly limitless. So I would say, send us an email. If you want to meet with me, I'll be happy to do that. Just put my name somewhere in there, and we'll sit down together and we'll kind of come up with a plan for you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And that's true of anybody here. If anybody's really struggling or just sort of trying to figure something out, or just want somebody to sort of, talk through ideas with, I'm happy to do that. In fact, I really, really enjoy it. I enjoy helping people sort of try to figure those things out. I think that's what I want to do when I grow up, is help people figure those things out. So I guess that's what I'm doing now. But I understand it's a big decision.
Dave, I received one private chat. Is
Sure.
it better to gain professional work experience for a couple of years before applying to graduate programs?
I think it depends on the program. So if you're looking to do something like business school related, yeah, I do think that's really worthwhile. A lot of business programs do want you to have some professional working experience before you come into them. Not to say that people don't go straight from undergrad into them, but it's good to have some experience. I mean, I think relevant experience is always a good thing. Again, it depends on what you want to do. I mean, there are certain things that you can do a little bit of as with just a bachelor's, but you could do more of, right, with a master's. Other things, if you want to be like a counselor, for example, or a lawyer, right, like, or a therapist, like you can only do that with those degrees. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get relevant work experience. And if you do want to, do something like that, like, you certainly can, and you can talk about, like, having a job where you maintain confidential records or something like that. But I think what you want to do is really think about the program itself and whether or not that would be helpful. So if you want to do, a doctorate in English, for example, I mean, if you went and worked in publishing for a couple of years, that'd be awesome. And I think that experience would be really worthwhile. I went and waited tables for 5 years. I would pass on that. That said, I do draw on that experience all the time, and I do think it was worthwhile. And there's, and that's how I made my living. So I got nothing against it. But I think if you can get really relevant experience, I think that's worthwhile. But I also think it depends on the program.
Do we have
May I
any other
just ask which
questions?
email? I'm so sorry. Which email would be best to email you directly at, is it Dave Beasley or the grad recruitment?
Do it at the grad recruitment. And that way, and if you just want to talk to me, just put my name somewhere in it. If you even just want to put that in the subject line, like for Dave, just put that in the subject line, they'll route it right over to me. Cognitive psychology and neuropsychology, those can be really competitive programs. So a couple of things to talk about. One is, so at UNLV, we don't have a master's degree in psychology. We only have the 2 PhD programs, but there are certainly master's degrees in psychology out there. So master's degrees are easier to get into than PhDs, obviously, right? But I would say, so PhD is always going to be competitive. Some programs are going to be more competitive than others, just like with anything else, right? But I would say that, your success rate in a program like that is probably going to be between 10 and 20% probably, which is not bad, PhD, honestly. The clinical psychology program here is sort of an outlier, right? They take about 4% of applicants. The really top level programs, like the University of Texas at Austin has one of the top English PhD programs in the country. They take like fewer than 4% of applicants each year. Those really sort of highly ranked top 5 programs are going to be super competitive. But I think, good, solid programs that you could get work out of, probably you're looking at taking, 10 to 20% of applicants, but I wouldn't even let that scare you. You'd be really kind of amazed at how many people really don't do any homework on their programs and don't really have very competitive applications and just like, well, let me give this a shot. So I think as long as you've done your homework and you put together a competitive package, I think your odds would be stronger than that. But it's really hard. Just be aware and be aware that you might have to take a couple of swings at it. And it's totally fine. If you don't get into a program one year, it is totally fine to reach out to that program in a respectful way and say, hey, I was one of your applicants this last year. I was really hoping I would get in, but I see that I didn't. What can I do to make my application more competitive the next time around? I've seen people do that a lot. And I've seen people, I've talked to people about that when I was with the English program, and I've seen people go back and do exactly what the program told them to do and get in the following cycle. So there's that too. How do you find out graduate school acceptance rate? That's a fantastic question. Some programs are very, you just sort of have to ask each program. Some programs are very open about their acceptance rate. Others are very tight-lipped. So sometimes they'll give you sort of a general thing. Other time they'll be like, yeah, we got, 158 applications last year and we took, 9 people. Or, we got 42 applications and we took 14 people. So they'll tell you sometimes. Opal has a great question, which is it possible to combine 2 disciplines into a PhD? Maybe. Is the answer. This is an increasingly popular thing, I think, and I think you're going to see more of it going forward. So for a long time, we've been very siloed in academia, right? Where you have this really sort of narrow band of expertise, right? So like, I am an expert, for example, my expertise is on Gothic novels published between 1764 and 1798, okay? Like, if it's published in that 34-year span, I am your man, okay? If it's published outside of that, yeah, I could probably tell you a little something about it. But the other thing is that we're all sort of working across disciplines, right? So a lot of my research involves 18th century landscape aesthetics and the role that those play in Gothic novels. I know you are all just hanging on every word of this absolutely fascinating research that I'm doing, right? But I promise I'm coming to a point, which is that we're all sort of more interdisciplinary than we give ourselves credit for because, like my dissertation director is very much into visual culture in the 18th century. So he knows a lot about art history in the 18th century, right? I know a lot about architecture, and specifically like landscape architecture in the 18th century, right? So the answer to that, I would think, is it would partially depend, right? Like if you wanted to put together chemistry and history, that might be really hard. But if you wanted to put together psychology and sociology, that might be a little bit easier, right? So I do think you're going to see more openness to those sort of cross-disciplinary dissertations. And then we also have a couple of interdisciplinary programs here at UNLV, and I think more and more schools are doing that, where you're actually working across a number of programs. So like our neuroscience program here at UNLV is like that, where you're working across a number of programs and you're learning from faculty across a number of different disciplines. I know I am just absolutely incapable of giving you all a short answer, and I would apologize for it, except that I can't help it.
Dr. Beasley?
Yes.
Hi, this is Opal.
Hi, Opal.
Hi. The reason why I asked you that is because I'm interested in going to Duke, and they offer African American studies and Black dance studies, but I was only going to go for the master's degree. So I was wondering about the PhD because they work actually together.
I think in a case of something like that, Opal, yes, absolutely. There's so much overlap there that I think that what you could maybe do is, I'm sorry, can you tell me the two exact things again? I know one of them was African American studies.
African American studies and Black dance studies.
So yeah, so I think what you could even do in a case like that is, if you wanted to do the master's and the PhD separately, is maybe do like the master's in Black dance studies, then go into the African American studies PhD program, but then do your doctoral research on Black dance, and sort of how that plays into it. And then or you could go sort of the opposite way. Although I think it would sort of work better that way, or you could just go straight into the PhD in African American studies and work with somebody from Black dance studies. So what I mean by that is you're going to have an outside person on your committee, and that person can be there just to sort of make sure that the protocol is followed, but they can also really be a resource for you. So in that case, it may be worthwhile to pick a faculty member from Black dance studies, ask them to be on your committee, but then really work closely with them.
Well, he runs both of the programs, so
well,
I wasn't really sure. Okay, thank you for answering.
Perfect. Absolutely, yes.
I think we'll take this one last question. So
Sure.
if you aren't sure if you want to do a PhD, but some schools only offer a combination of both, would it be better to apply or look at other schools?
That's a really good question. I mean, so in programs that are direct entry PhD programs with a bachelor's, you will at some point pick up a master's. Okay, there will be no fanfare about it. They'll just call you one day and say your master's is ready. So it would be possible to just pick up that master's and walk away. That said, it can be really tough if you want to go back to a PhD program. If you wanted to go back later, it can be really tough to then explain why you walked away, because they don't want you to do that. You know, the new program won't want you to do that to them. What I would say is, I think if you're not sure if you want to do a PhD, I would do the master's first. The PhD is a really big commitment. If you're not, I always tell people you need to have a lot of internal focus and drive to complete it. And if you're really not sure that you want to do it, my concern is that you won't. So I think in that case, what I would do is I would look at master's programs, because those same PhD programs will have mechanisms for you to enter with a master's degree, and you'll just do less coursework. Also, while we're on this topic, I want to say one other thing, which is if you are looking at master's programs, but you want to get funded, there's a lot of funding available here at UNLV. You all know that already for master's students. But I would also say look at what are called terminal master's programs. These are master's programs that do not have a PhD in that area attached to them. It's a lot of times easier to get assistantships in terminal master's programs than it is in master's programs with PhDs attached, because the PhD students take all the funding.
Perfect. I think we are out of time. So before we end today's session, we would like to thank our presenter. Thank you so much, Dave. If anybody's interested in getting in contact with him, he dropped his email in the chat. If you could all just take a few moments to fill out the feedback survey, it's also in the chat. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. Have a great day, everybody.